Welcome, everyone. I'm currently away on vacation and will be back Wednesday, October 22nd. Today, your host will be Søren Basher. Søren runs his own investment advisory firm called Brilliant Advice.
Well, Jeff, welcome back to Brighter with Sørenbert.
Yeah, this is one of the best shows I've been on all week. Oh wait, it's one of the first ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, today we're going to talk a little bit about how analysts are viewing Tesla, and we're also going to talk a little bit about the Optimus program, as well as a few other things. Let's start with some of the analysts' thoughts. Does that sound good?
Yeah. Let's get into it.
Sounds good. So here's RBC Capital Markets. They bumped up their Tesla price target from 325, which seems like a low and old price now, doesn't it, to 500. Yeah. And one of their focuses here is the 500 target is based on their view of the Optimus opportunity. So from my perspective, it's nice to see analysts starting to think about the Optimus program more seriously. And here they say that we estimate Tesla could capture 5% of our projected 9 trillion humanoid robot market by 2050. You know, it's a modest market share and also a pretty modest total addressable market. But it's good. It's good to see that they are at least beginning to think about this.
It is, and I've always said there's going to be many players making humanoid robots. It's going to be a question of how useful is how many use cases can the bot that they produced actually do for you, and what are the most when you're designing a factory and you're designing where's the labor go, what are you automating, what are you doing manually, what are you doing semi-automated, what are you doing automated. There's a value of capital. There's a capital dollar efficiency for doing that effort. There's a labor dollar efficiency for doing that effort. And it looks like to me that Tesla, instead of, just rushing Optimus out there with maybe a less capable hand, maybe less capable in movement or slower in training, it looks like they're really going to let this thing cook and put something out there that is highly capable and really just solve that whole truth table of, the AI brain, the manufacturing capability, and the product capability with this hand. And it looks like they're going to solve that trifecta, and they're going to and they have the best training ground in the world, which are their own factories, to try this out on. So I'm glad to see, like you said, analysts are starting to recognize this. And this is the thing. This is what we've talked about for a couple of years. There's not going to be some trumpet sounding and saying, oh, it's time to start investing for Optimus. It's just going to start happening as people start seeing this convergence. And the markets are going to move way ahead of actual bots being out there in mass quantity. So this is where researching the best companies, the companies that have the highest probability of success, the companies that are working on the most capable products, the companies that have the ability to manufacture at scale, all those things have to be true. The companies that have the ability to do AI on real world products. So now Tesla, by the time Optimus ships, would have had millions of vehicles of their own. These are just robots on wheels. So they would have proven out physical real-world AI with vehicles. So you're going to have this proven commodity of their ability to manufacture vehicles. By the way, their ability to manufacture Starlink under Elon's companies, that's a product, that's miniaturized electronics. That's molding of plastics and other and other materials for miniaturized electronics, all the way up to the what they do at Tesla. So there's a lot of things that have been proven at Tesla that Optimus has a great starting point for being the most difficult product to make in the world.
That Starlink factory, as I understand it, Jeff, is raw materials in, product out. And I think it's also the largest printed circuit board manufacturing facility in the U.S.
Yeah.
And
you know what? A lot of it,
too.
Yeah, and a lot of that, surface, it's called SMT, surface mount technology. A lot of that is just moved out of the country. If there's anybody doing assembly in the U.S., a lot of that SMT equipment is in Mexico. But I mean, it all started here in Japan and a few other countries. And when manufacturing migrated out to Asia, so did a lot of that SMT equipment. But that's always been, so in the kind of that 2D world of populating a printed circuit board, that has been highly automated for a number of decades. And over time, the components have miniaturized, and the inspection ability, the optical inspection ability has improved. So you're getting error-free product out of those processes. But yeah, just bringing this all back together, Tesla has all of these assets under, Elon Inc. And, he is setting up. And what has he done now over this last year? You've seen these major supply agreements for silicon and fabrication in Texas. You've seen a major deal on cameras and imaging, because all of these vehicles, all of these Optimus are going to have obviously major amounts of cameras and imaging. So I expect more deals to come, but yeah, this is a very exciting time.
When we think about Optimus and Tesla's position in the market, thinking to this analyst projections of having a 5% market share. So who else realistically, Jeff, has a shot at this, right? We've got the other Meg 7 companies. We've got apparently Meta and Apple having kind of a robotics program that they're working on. Nothing really that public yet. We've got the likes of Google and NVIDIA making investments in some of the startup robotics companies like Figure and Eptronic in the case of Google. And then we have Amazon, who already has 1 million sort of robots of various shapes and sizes, not humanoids, but just robots deployed across their warehouses around the world. So they're clearly a major robotics player. Again, we haven't really seen what they're doing, if anything, on the humanoid side yet. But how do you think about this, Jeff, in terms of, who could be the other 95% of this market share situation?
Yeah. Well, first off, I think Tesla investors and Tesla people following the company have to realize that there's market share and there's margin share. So building the most capable bot, I think, in this situation is going to be very important. If you draw back to the comparisons to the smartphone world, all of the money is being made by Apple iOS and Android, the Android operating system. And obviously Samsung as well is doing a very good job on margin share. Now, what else has happened in the smartphone world is that there's a crop of Chinese OEMs, Xiaomi, Oppo, Vivo, Huawei, that have also cropped up significant market share in China, significant global market share outside of the US. And they've been very successful as well. Something very similar could happen with humanoid, but the US has to get very serious about supply chain. Humanoids, I think, will be very different than smartphones. Smartphones launched with global supply chains, mostly based out of China, but honestly, they were highly globalized. I remember being at the beginning stages and many tens of millions of unit stages beyond that in the Android world, and there were many suppliers actually in the U.S., Europe, and in APAC and abroad. But I think with humanoid, just getting back to square one here, I think humanoids are actually going to launch with localized supply chains. I don't think if you're a humanoid manufacturer, and given what's going on geopolitically, and given the GDP ramifications of what a humanoid is, I think there's going to be a national security conversation here at some point too. And I think, the U.S. and Americas, hopefully, but U.S. will want to have their own encapsulated bot supply chain. Mm-hmm. China will have their own. European Union may at some point have their own. Maybe there'll be a rest of world version. But I think we're going to start with localized supply chains. So I think that may do something with the ramp in terms of there may be some stutters in the beginning. But in terms of who's going to be there, I think it looks like Tesla and Figure are working on highly capable bots. It looks like Eptronic is also working on a highly capable bot. And it looks like there is a crop of new work that is emerging with hands. Basically, people recognizing and looking at Tesla and saying, all right, Tesla went back in the lab and said, hey, we're canning what we're doing in 2025. We really got to get this hand right. We really got to get some other things right on the bot. So I think this is giving other companies a breather. When people used to ask me, did Tesla fall behind? And is everybody passing Tesla? My answer was no. Tesla actually knows where they're at relative to real mass production of a real product that will be really impactful in the world. There are other companies that know where there are too, but a lot of them either have not mass produced anything like this, or they're making the wrong product that's just going to be DOA. So I've likened it to, the 10 bots that, Jensen walks out on stage with at his major events. I've said basically 9 out of those 10 are not going to make it, but a couple will make it in the beginning, then a couple more will make it. And in the US, I think Tesla, Figure, Aptronic, and CERN, you should weigh in on this too, because you're studying this space intently. And then of course in China, there will be a crop of bots that appear from some of these companies that are smartphone/EV based. A lot of these companies may be at the forefront of it. And of course, I'm sure there'll be a player out of Europe where, by the way, traditional robotic arms, a lot of the home bases for those companies, if you think ABB, for example, Switzerland, you think, some of these companies their home base is in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be a lot. So the short answer is there'll be a lot of players, but I think a couple will emerge in the US, a crop in China. And the question is, CERN, not only who's making them, but who's powering the compute.
Right. And that's where Tesla, again, seems to have a massive advantage, right, on the compute side and the know-how and the combined forces with XAI. And then, of course, the manufacturing. And I'm hard-pressed to come up with any other U.S. company that is really well-positioned from the manufacturing side. It seems to me they're all going to have to partner with somebody else. And as you know, that brings about its own serious challenges.
Yeah, I mean, if you start going down the Mag 7, world, just picking out a couple of them, Apple is clearly talented at making stationary, portable devices, and they do a very good job in heuristic code software. They do a good job with app ecosystems. They do a great job connecting and selling their product servicing their product.
Mm-hmm.
So they have tremendous skills there, but somebody else is manufacturing. Let's be very clear. Apple is not manufacturing, somebody else is, but Apple is controlling every aspect of how their devices are being manufactured. But the big missing thing there is AI, real world AI, and that capability. So I think Tesla has created this engine of how to get devices animated in the real world. And it's not clear to me anybody else has figured this out. So everybody else that's going and say, I'm going to just go buy whatever NVIDIA is making. NVIDIA can't work with everybody at the same time. So NVIDIA has to make prioritization choices right now. And what's NVIDIA doing? NVIDIA is ramping the data center right now. They are focused on that. And I'm not saying they're not focused on and they are. They're making active investments in physical real world AI devices and products. But I would, they can't be everywhere, and they can't serve 80 OEMs equivalently and bring together the kind of real-time decision making that that Tesla can make with all these things. Remember, we always talk about vertically integrated supply chain. Vertically integrated engineering is equivalent, if not more powerful, than a vertically integrated supply. You can make different decisions on your supply chain of what to put on the outside and what to bring in strategically based on what's going on with capacity. But when you've made the decision to vertically integrate engineering, you are condensing time, you are aligning decision-making and prioritization, and you are also reducing the time needed to correct something if something goes afoul. It can be corrected very quickly as well. It's not spread out all over the world. So Tesla's vertically integrated engineering, when you ask who else is out there, the question I would ask is, who has all of the assets from the base layer of silicon all the way to the physical real world AI device being sold out in the marketplace? And there's not another company.
Yeah, and my sort of theory too is that some of the other, excellent manufacturers in the world are actually probably interested in partnering with Tesla. We'll see how that shapes up. But for me, for example, Hyundai would be an interesting choice to partner and have them perhaps make the bot, in Southeast Asia. But anyway, we'll have to see. That's really pure speculation on my part.
Yeah, I mean, I think there'll be a lot of new partnerships, a lot of new things formed. I think there's a political aspect too of, who do people want to work with. I think there's going to be companies that are going to try to do all these things. If you look at OpenAI's assets, they are trying to do all of this right now. They are trying to they want to build humanoid, they want to build bots. They want to do all of these different things. Meta wants to do all of these things. So we'll see. This is a very difficult thing to do. That's all I can say. This is a very difficult thing to do.
The other thing on that too, I would add is if I'm Samsung and I'm making chips for Elon, it would be a logical conclusion also to get into the bot manufacturing business for them too. They're a pretty significant manufacturer. But just back to this report real quick, Jeff. So in terms of the humanoid bot market opportunity, we mentioned a $9 trillion global TAM by 2050, 25 years from now. They've got households being a third of that, agriculture being 21%, manufacturing and logistics 12%, and retail and commerce 11% as the largest areas for adoption, according to the author of the report. And interestingly, they've got China representing about 61% of the TAM, followed by the rest of the world at 24%, the EU at 8%, and the US at only 7%. That kind of struck me as being kind of low for the US, and I was kind of curious as to why they would have such a low number.
There's a whole issue right now in the US, and this is being studied by, and there's articles out. In fact, I shared one in my subscriber space just about what's happening with automation and what's happening in China specifically versus the rest of the world. And I think just the US needs to get a little bit more closely associated with automating things that have been manual forever. So this is why Tesla and self-driving and getting this launched in the US is so important, and getting it at scale. Again, not dismissing other robotaxi suppliers that have also started this even earlier than Tesla in the US, but just really getting this to meaningful scale is important. We are under automated in the US. So this is why when you're under automated, this is why there would be concern about the adoption rate. We're also, it's hard to describe, a culture as a monolith in the US, but the data speaks in terms of what's going on in our factories, and our factories are under automated relative to the rest of the world. And there's statistics on this in terms of the number of bots manufactured in a country and the number of bots installed and in use in a country relative to the number of employees doing manual assembly. So there's statistics out there. I shared some data on my X feed and my subscriber feed about this. It's something to keep an eye on, because if we kind of gave smartphone to China and to Asia. We could have kept it here. So we gave that industry, they took it and they ran with it. They took batteries and battery production. They've run with that. They've taken EV, even though Tesla is, prominent and really the number one player in the world. They can flip flop back and forth with BYD. That's fine. But when Tesla chooses to make sub $30,000 vehicles, they'll be number one again. We can't let that happen with humanoid. We can't allow that to happen with humanoid. They may out volume the US, but in terms of capability and volume factored together, we've got to figure this out. So this is why a lot of analysts are just thinking that the adoption rate could be lower here, just because of our general adoption rate of robotics across many things. Everything, you go out to some of these countries, everything is automated, from getting onto the bus and getting onto the train to, your burger being made. Like there's even a lot more food automation that's occurring out there than here. So this is something the US, this is all about how do you take redundant tasks and the things that are kind of boring, redundant things to do and get them automated so that humans can start thinking about more creative and more higher level things that they could be doing.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. If China has, over 60% of the market in 2050, then I think that we would be falling way behind. Hopefully that's not the case. the final thing from this report, they're talking about, the humanoid revenue. So for Tesla, about 22% from the US, 14% from the EU, 58% from China, and 6% from the rest of the world. So they're optimistic about Tesla's ability to sell its bots in China. I've always sort of had a going in premise that Tesla may not be allowed to sell their humanoid in China. For me, that's upside, because the robot is the ultimate, surveillance machine. And then likewise, the Chinese companies would probably be blocked in our markets.
Yeah, I totally see that.
Yeah, so that's interesting that this analyst doesn't think that, or is not saying that here. And then the other thing is, from a valuation perspective, Jeff, they've got the humanoid segment accounting for about 36% of the total valuation. Now, that flies in the face of what I and others, and even Elon has talked about in terms of Optimus being the vast majority of Tesla's business value. And so my sense here is that this analyst has been pretty conservative with his estimates.
Well, yeah,
that 9%.
You've been looking at this for a long time, CERN. I think they're stepping into it.
Yeah, I think so. And it's just when you do some real back of the napkin math, Jeff, that 9 trillion in market opportunity by 2050 sounds like a big number. But when you think about if GDP grows at 3% globally for the next 25 years, we're going to have global GDP go from 100 trillion to about 240 trillion. So 9 trillion of 240 is only 3.75%. That to me seems like a pretty low percent of GDP for something that is a labor replacement, which labor right now is about 50% of global GDP. So that either tells you that they think the humanoid robots are going to be a pretty small part of the labor market, or very slow to get going, 25 years from now, still getting started. I tend to think it's going to be the opposite. I think it'll ramp up pretty quickly once we're out of this development cycle, and it'll be perhaps even a larger part of the labor market than it is today.
I think you're right.
Okay, Jeff, let's move on to Dan Ives at Wedbush. He sees Tesla's valuation at $3 trillion by the end of 2026. And he's also kind of excited about the prospect for Tesla producing more vehicles. So he's got here at the next page. So looking for the company to restore its impressive 500,000 unit quarterly delivery rate. And he's actually predicting that the company can get to about 600,000 deliveries per quarter. And then, and certainly Dan is a big proponent of Tesla's AI businesses. He thinks that the Optimus robot can transform the company by 2026. So in contrast with RBC, who's looking 25 years out, Dan is looking much more near term, and so on. So let me just play a little clip from the interview here with Dan.
China's trying to limit the exports of rare earths to the U.S. You say Tesla's the best position to deal with that because they do about 40% of their deliveries in China.
Yeah, I mean, look, it speaks to why they made such a big bet on China, with Gigafactory in Shanghai. This is going to really, I think, insulate them. When you look at the raw materials, look, that right now, I mean, that's the biggest worry in autos. And even when you think about things like, Optimus and robots, but for Tesla, they're in a very good position of strength here. As well as also, you're seeing delivery strength in China, and that's what they're betting on. And I think you're seeing a comeback here. A big part of this $2 trillion, ultimately bull case $3 trillion thesis is the China story for Tesla.
Okay. Even though 40% of the deliveries are in China, the other 60% are around the world. A big portion of those are right here in the U.S. Are there concerns about increasing cost of rare earths, potentially impacting margins? And also, the company just announced a lineup of lower cost vehicles. How do you see it impacting that lineup?
Yeah, look, it's a concern. I mean, Frank, if you think about it, I mean, the price points probably would have been, call it 4,000 or 5,000 lower. I mean, they gave themselves flexibility given increasing prices, but also they do have an advantage in the U.S. because in the U.S., given, you look at the vast majority of that is produced in U.S. parts, so they're not really exposed like some others relative to tariffs and some others. And I think right now, when you look overall global, Tesla right now is in the best position, but it continues to be the AI play. Because when you think about autonomous and robotics, that's going to be the key to the valuation that I think continues to go higher. Raw materials, I don't view that as really putting any dent in what I view as what's going to be one of the biggest AI growth stories over the next decade.
All right, really quickly, I want to go back to those lower cost vehicles.
So we'll just pause it there for a second, Jeff. It sounds like Dan has been listening to you.
Yeah, Tesla. Yeah, Dan has been ahead, by the way, on a lot of these calls. In terms of rare earths, I do want to. I'll spend a few seconds on this. Dan is 100% correct. Tesla's presence in China and relationship with China is going to help them here. Yes, they have to apply for the same licenses that every other company does, but these licenses are appropriated in a particular order and a particular priority. And Elon's relationship with senior levels in the government and Tesla's very strong standing. It's not just a Shanghai vehicle factory. Now they have the Megapack factory, and the amount of exports coming out of that factory, that's a huge thing for their economy, for employment, for the upstream supply base that's 95% plus locally sourced, actually in this perimeter around Shanghai and in greater parts of China. China loves Tesla, and Tesla does not need to be in a subservient position, but just a great partner to China, because Tesla is giving things to China in terms of, again, its factories, its business, its employment, and really helping kickstart the EV ecosystem in that supply base. China is also concerned about having so many OEM EV automakers start up, ramp up, buy a bunch of material, hold a bunch of inventory, fill up a bunch of lots, and not run their supply chain correctly. And that could cause a bunch of problems upstream. When you have a steady player like Tesla with a great domestic market in China and a great export market, they're going to get prioritization for rare earths. And if they're getting cleared for Tesla vehicles in China, they're going to get cleared for Tesla vehicles all over the world. In terms of cost, Dan was correct too. In terms of tariffs, Tesla is in the best position. So Tesla will see increases in their bill of material cost and for importing certain parts, but they've done a great job localizing. I think they're over 91% in the U.S. and USMCA, and I think they've done the best job of building a U.S. supply. It's basically in every major economic zone, they've built a localized supply chain, over 90% localization, U.S., European Union, China. So they've really put themselves, this is hard work over the last decade. You don't do this kind of stuff overnight. And it's also difficult planning, because the easier path in planning a supply chain would be to just globalize it and have that partnership everywhere. The harder thing to do is saying, I got to find that same thing that gives me the same Tesla quality I want, the same design specs I need, but now I got to find it near Brandenburg in near Berlin or near Shanghai. I've got to find the same part and I got to make it everywhere. That's a lot more difficult to do. So Tesla did the homework, did the hard work up front. So now when these tariffs hit and now when these export control hits, they're in the best position, quite frankly.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it, when you think about that, the complexity and the complications of having the same product built in 3 different factories around the world, and yet ensuring the things you just talked about. It's really quite staggering when you think about it. And being prepared for a situation like this and not being as impacted as some other companies are. Yeah,
Tesla doesn't get enough credit for its supply chain and the engineering work that the engineering team does and the supply chain engineering team does to enable that supply chain. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't come up in any analyst notes, but the work that they've done to localize supply chain, and by the way, they're minimizing rare earths. They're developing, if not already starting to produce an electric motor without rare earths. So they're ahead of a lot of these things just a couple of years in advance, it seems, and they've made a lot of the right decisions on this, where other companies right now are quite frankly struggling. Finally, just on the U.S., there's rumors of a little bit more relief coming to the auto. The auto sector is getting decimated by input tariffs. tariffs on the inputs to assemble. So you promote and you want to say, I want you to bring assembly to the US, but I'm going to continue to tariff all of your inputs. It's really, they were already crippled beforehand, and the economics didn't work beforehand for them to assemble that vehicle in the US. And now you're saying bring it to the US, and I'm gonna put tariffs on the inputs. So I think the administration is seeing this, and I think some relief is coming, and it's really good for the US because I've seen negative manufacturing job growth month over month this year. We're at a net negative this year. And I think part of the problem has been companies are kind of like, I would build here, but the economics are much better. I don't have to pay a tariff to build it in that country. I'll just pay one smaller tariff to bring it over here. So if the administration can break that logjam, it's part and parcel of this conversation of what's happening with Tesla, what's happening with rare earths, what's happening with tariffs. I think the auto industry may be on the brink of some relief, and Tesla will participate in that too.
Fantastic. Yeah. So changing gears here, the Model S was named in Time's top 25 inventions of the past 25 years. Interesting how they reach back in time. That's great news. And I think that really every single Tesla product probably should be in the top 25. And certainly in the past, the Model 3, I think, was named in 2017, was named in Time's list. And I think the Model S the Roadster was included on the list in 2006 and 2008. So this is not a first for Tesla, but it certainly seems appropriate to be named to this list.
Yeah. My memories of the model, I remember being in the Bay Area and just walking down the street after a dinner, after a meeting or some point, and seeing this car whiz by, and there's no noise coming from the car. And most of the cars on the road, 99% of the cars on the road had an ICE engine in them, at that time. And I see this beautiful shaped form just go right by. I'm like, what is that? And then I saw another one, and I'm like, I kept seeing them in the Bay Area, and I live in the Midwest. And all of a sudden I did some research. I'm like, oh, there's this thing called Tesla and this Model S. And this was in 2012. I saw a couple of them. And then the first quarter saw a couple more in 2013. And that's when I went and test drove that. My first time in a Model S was in Q1 of 2013. And I test drove it on a Saturday and ordered it the same day. And started investing in Tesla actually the Monday after. I put those two things together. I sat in the car and drove it. Like, nothing drives like this. And I had, driven really nice cars beforehand, and just nothing ever drove like this. And this was a Model S P85, rear wheel drive. That's all they had. And I bought it, and then I've been driving a Tesla ever since. So it's so fitting that it would be one of the top products of that time period, because for me, it got me into EV, and it introduced me to the company Tesla. And that vehicle to me made EVs cool, and it made EVs, that was the start of, even though it was very high priced, you knew this technology was going to be high priced, but it was eventually going to come down because they made it so good and so much better than anything else at that price tier. You knew that they were going to, if they could just figure this equation out, they were going to bring it down, and this was the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. Here's a little interview with Franz here.
A future that we really want to. Elon's just a visionary, somebody who continues to just push the boundaries, looking for a future that we really want to aspire to be in, worth fighting for. And I think as a designer in that environment, we have the ability to craft and create like this vision of what the future could be. And we always say, like, the future should look like the future. And so we're constantly working on developing projects that feel like the future. And I think you can see that in products like Cybertruck and the Cybercab and upcoming vehicles, even Optimus. So it's super exciting. It's always pushing. Even now, from day one, it's always been the same. And yeah, it's also incredibly fun.
So Speaking of incredibly fun, Jeff, we've got validation vehicles now just outside of the Phoenix area in Gilbert, Arizona, close to Mesa. So that's fantastic. We also have some more hiring going on in the AI and robotics sort of unit of Tesla. We've got a couple of different jobs here, the autonomous mobile robotics job for an integration engineer, and then a software engineer for the same group. Two of these are in Austin, one is in Sparks, Nevada. And so if we take a look then at sort of the job descriptions of these, it's kind of interesting. So this includes, it says, autonomous mobile robots, AMRs, right? So it's not just Optimus. It's not just the cars. And they're talking about automated storage and retrieval systems. So to your earlier comments about, automating manufacturing, that seems to be the focus of these jobs. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it is. And it could also be some sort of, this could also be some sort of connection. In addition to that, it could be some sort of connection or interface of what happens to the semi when it arrives at its job point, and how does it unload it? How is it loaded? And could there be some sort of autonomy and connection between the semi and these AMRs to load and unload the load? So it's just a number of directions this could go. AMRs and conveyor systems are very common in not only the assembly portion of the factory, but primarily in the inbound and outbound portion of a factory. So envision that you're bringing material into the factory, and in these bots would be moving and scanning labels. Okay, what is it? Who is this? Where is it from? And moving these. Okay, these need to be opened and processed and cycle counted, and it goes here. And so just putting material in the right locations to be processed. And that's what AMRs are used for, in the conveyance systems as well, to move these boxes. Think of it from a loading dock. Think of a semi backing up into a loading dock. And so I think there is some connection here, and I see Sparks, Nevada. I think there's some connection here to the semi, but this could also easily be modularized and used in any factory.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And the software engineer here, the descriptions, what will you do? Responsible for developing, maintaining, and improving algorithms and models associated with perception, navigation, safety, and fleet management of autonomous mobile robots. So this is exciting. Tesla,
very exciting.
In the AI and robotics sort of category, have 151 different job opportunities at this current time.
Yeah, I don't see this stopping, and that is a sign of growth. And these X accounts that are tracking, they're doing a great job, by the way, of just anytime you see these, and if there's people like me or others that can interpret, sometimes there's people that know more about where these positions could be used. I think we just have a great community that's kind of bringing this stuff out, and I think it's a great thing. This is expansion. Getting into AMRs, getting into various forms of conveyance automation. This is expansion in terms of what Tesla is doing. Tesla is clearly focused on these machines that make other machines, and quite frankly, the transportation between getting the product from point A to point B.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And also just on Tesla's job site, I think I noticed this morning that there was over 2,500 different job positions open. Now, they may be hiring more than one person for each of those positions, but if you know anybody that's interested in working for a company like Tesla, there's lots of different opportunities. This is also interesting, Jeff. Tesla's they're able now to begin autonomous driving testing on public roads in Japan, and so that's another country to work on. Japan should be an interesting market for autonomy. Japanese roads are probably a lot better constructed and maintained than most other road systems in the world, but still nonetheless could prove to be challenging in its own unique ways. Yeah,
in South Korea too, I know there's a number of good places for them to continue to expand. So yeah, this is exciting to see this expansion, and just to me, it speaks to how quick the adaption rate, the fact that a car can be physically dropped in a new country, and it's like, okay, I know how to drive here.
Yeah, I love the videos from Australia where it has to stop for kangaroos jumping across the road and so on. Things that FSD has probably never seen before. So here is the Model 3 Premium. Production started at Tesla's Fremont factory, and this is quite a nice looking vehicle here with all black logos And here's a photo of the turn signal stalk. Stalks are back. And the front bumper camera with washer. It's hard to see here in this image, but it's there. And then
Tesla's continuing to improve. Just continuing to make these minor updates and continuing to improve, continuing to keep the look fresh. And I'm sure there's cost reductions that are occurring. When you do these factory changeovers and start up a new kit in the factory or a new model in the factory, you do a changeover. There's things that consumers can see that are changed, and there's things that they can't see. But you typically try to group them together and get them out there. So yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of things happening under the hood on these too, which is great.
We've talked about robotics, but now we're going to see an example of somebody controlling a robot with his mind, right? And this is pretty amazing. And so here's the video. He's got this robotic arm with a spoon, and he's controlling this robot with just his mind.
Just unbelievable.
Isn't it?
That's pretty freaking ridiculous.
And I think actually this is so profound. I'm just going to play it again just to watch this.
That's pretty freaking ridiculous.
Yeah, it's life-changing for people that are handicapped. I mean, this is just life-changing technology, and this is the hybrid or merger of what's happening with the brain interface work and what's happening with the ability to control automation. So think about also having bots in the factory that can be, more remotely controlled if needed, or if there's some sort of intervention needed. It just, the combinations and possibilities are endless here when you can control robotics with your mind.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? To be able to control a robotic arm to feed himself is incredible. And they say here, can't wait to see what's next. Well, ultimately what's next, and Elon has talked about this, is he says the long-term aspiration of Neuralink would be to achieve a symbiosis and a democratization of artificial intelligence such that it's not monopolistically held in a purely digital form by governments and large corporations. And I think this is a really important point. It's kind of scary, I think, for most people for the idea of putting a computer in their brain. But when you think about perhaps, trying to protect ourselves against, large companies or even governments controlling AI, this is perhaps one way that humanity to kind of protect itself against that if we kind of become AI ourselves. The use cases obviously are very clear for people that have disabilities of any kind, but even for everybody else, this may be the way that humanity evolves to over time.
Yeah, it's crazy to think like what's limiting us right now in terms of generating ideas and getting ideas from where they are today to something into a real product or to a real action in the world. And it could be a physical limitation, it could be some sort of mental limitation. Look where AI is going to come in and start filling those gaps. You have the ability right now with AI to just generate what an app could look like, and it will code it up for you and generate it. And now you've got, brain interfaces that are moving robotics. So yeah, I mean, this can be both coincidentally a scary time, but also a very uplifting and hopeful time too.
Just think one day you're sitting on the couch watching a football game and you want a beer and you're thinking about having a beer and your Optimus robot just brings it over to you.
Yeah.
I guess that's the
scary.
future. Yeah.
That's also scary at the same time too. And hopefully the Optimus will have some sort of reasoning in his mind too, in terms of how many beers they've brought over a certain time period.
You might not even think it because the Optimus probably knows how many beers you would typically drink, in a day or something like that. And it just says, oh, it's been a while since I've delivered a beer to Jeff. I think it's time for me just to go get him another one.
And it should know your schedule. And it should know your schedule too. And if you've got something important coming up where you have to have great oratory skills and be able to speak, it should know how to tamp that down based on, scanning your body weight and looking at it. So
That's right.
the possibilities are endless, Cernbert.
They are. And speaking of which, we've got one last thing for today, Jeff. We've got SpaceX announcing the timeline and pricing for a cargo Starship to Moon and Mars missions. And so on their website, they're saying that the Moon and Mars surface cargo missions in 2028 and 2030, respectively. So the Moon in 2028, Mars in 2030. And each priced at $100 million per metric ton or $100,000 per kilogram. And then here's, from the website, some images here. SpaceX plans to start cargo missions. Here's the pricing, and then here's just the individual screenshots of each one.
This is amazing time to be alive. I think, we could be within, a decade of this being a regular, like a reality. And for that to happen inside of a decade, it's just between this convergence of AI and then now this exploration outside of this planet being more attainable and achievable than ever before. It's a very exciting time.
I think we should start thinking about when we'll start producing Optimus on the moon and maybe even a Starship factory on the moon. We'd start thinking about that. I know some analysts are thinking about Optimus out to 2050, but it wouldn't surprise me if we start to see some developments in that regard well before 2050 off of Earth.
Yeah, that would be an out of this world supply chain. So
that's right. to add to the complexity and potential tariff issues in the future.
Yeah, can be tariffing between planets. So would not be looking forward to trying to deal with that. But fun times ahead, CERN.
Yep. We have a front row seat, Jeff. So thank you very much for your time today and for your analysis. It's much appreciated.
Thank you. It's great speaking with you, Hearn, CERN, whatever your name is. No,
that's
great
right.
Speaking with you. I almost called you Herbert and CERN. I was like Hearn, but no, it's been great speaking with you, and look forward to doing this again, my friend.
Sounds good, Jeff. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.